I feel like I only got this many people because I used curse words in my title. And then slammed an industry that is fairly burgeoning. So I guess I'm shadowing this. So today we're going to talk about why growth hacking's bullshit. I don't put an asterisk in bullshit when I say it, so Volta may edit that out later. And what you should be doing instead. So a lot of people here I recognize, but I'd say about 50% of you I don't. So I'll make the assumption you don't really know who I am. In terms of why you should listen to me, I guess. I teach at Propel in both the launch and build programs. I've taught the last few years at the Dalhousie startup program. In addition, I have done quite a few jobs at different startups. As a member of Radian 6, I oversaw the digital marketing team and helped build that out before acquisition by Salesforce. So I've also worked at Salesforce. I worked at Titanfile, which was one of the original companies in Volta. And eventually I was COO of LiveLens, which was acquired by Mobivity. And now I own a company called CloudKettle. And in terms of this topic, my specialty is digital sales and marketing for SaaS companies. So if you're not a SaaS company, maybe not all of this is going to apply, but hopefully it will. So what is growth hacking? This is actually a very impressive description of growth hacking and probably had a lot more thought put into it than the actual practitioners in general give it. So growth hacking is a process of rapid experimentation across marketing channels and product development to identify the most effective, efficient ways to grow a business. That sounds great. And if this is what everybody was doing, then I'd wholeheartedly be behind it. That's not actually what most people are doing when they say they're growth hackers. So in my experience, and I've met a lot of quote-unquote growth hackers over the years, they share an awful lot in common with people who've also called themselves ninjas, gurus, and wizards over time. And I think other than the fact that they've deleted these things from their LinkedIn profiles, if you were to able longitudinally to go backwards in time and examine, I think you would find an awful lot of people who are now quote-unquote growth hackers 2 years ago were quote-unquote ninjas, and 2 years before that they were quote-unquote gurus, and a few years before that they were quote-unquote wizards. Or social media gurus or social media wizards or whatever the case may be. There's a series of people who go through the marketing profession just latching on to whatever the cool name of the year is. Right now it happens to be growth hacking. I'm old enough to remember a couple of these other titles. So, growth hackers, in my experience, and again, this is biased towards a specific group of people, but for what it's worth, I spend a lot of time in San Francisco, so it's not just this ecosystem I'm referring to. The ones I meet, because of who it attracts, they tend to really enjoy being individual contributors. If you were to look at them overall as a industry of people, they tend not to be team players. They're very focused on practicing a skill that they can execute on their own. And they also tend to get very frustrated when they can't do that. So, hey, we're going to do this thing and we're going to launch this program. It's going to generate 10,000 new followers. Like, that's great. Have you talked to operations to make sure that we can handle those 10,000 new followers? Well, no, but I mean, and it's like, well, you gotta, it's not for the benefit of you just getting 10,000 new followers. You have to work with the other parts of the organization to make this happen. So they tend not to be team players. They tend to really enjoy being individual contributors. They like being heroes. They like doing big, flashy things. And that's not how great teams are built. So, overall, in my experience, growth hacking promises a cheat code for scaling. And once that cheat code expires, your company still sucks at the game. So you can bring somebody in and then get you a couple of quick and easy wins and bumps. And especially if you're an early stage startup, that seems amazing, but it doesn't get you anywhere 3 or 4 months later. You're still stuck back at the same spot. So growth hacks are often intellectually lazy. Very busy people, i.e. people who work at SaaS startups in particular, are under a ton of pressure and they find shortcuts very appealing. And I fall into that. And I can speak from experience that those shortcuts generally don't pay off in the long run. Growth hacks are very appealing to you as founders because they tend not to require long-term planning. So, beware of the article that says, the quick and easy way to increase your social media following by XX%, or anything that starts with the quick and easy way, etc. How I 100x'd our something something in 2 months. We like that because we don't have to sit down and plan out what our entire marketing plan and budget for the next 6 months are going to be to do this little thing that we read about this morning. Tactics, growth hacks tend to be tactics that measure outputs and outcomes. So what are you going to do with 1,000 new Twitter followers? What are you going to do with 100 new free trial signups? Like, do you have a plan on what you're going to do with these things? And if you read those articles, they tend not to focus on that. They're only focused on how you 20x, 40x, 100x something, which is very appealing. They tend not to care very much about what you're going to do with that in terms of generating revenue for your company in the long term or even the midterm. They often rely on gray area tools that are potential security and privacy risks. So, hey, I found this new tool online. You just input your username or authorize it with your Twitter token, and it's going to help you do X, Y, Z. Well, inevitably, that means you're handing over most of your Twitter information and a lot of your followers' information to some unknown company that you just read about, or your Google Analytics information, or your AdWords credentials, etc. So be very wary of those things. These companies aren't doing that for free for no reason. As the adage goes, if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. Or essentially, your data is the product. And they tend to waste time and focus. And this is the area that I have the most issue with. And this is why I really don't like when I meet with founders and they're trying to explain to me these little shortcuts that they found, because those little shortcuts they found, they start to obsess over, and they're not focusing on the big picture of the things they should be doing to run the company better. Also, since most growth hacks are essentially exploits, so if they're part of a legitimate platform, by the time they're published on Growth Hacker or whatever site you find them on, whatever company you've exploited, be it Twitter, Facebook, Google, as the case may be, they're going to have patched that because they're smarter than you. They have literally thousands of engineers dedicated to such things, and it's not going to work anymore. Or 500 other people read this article before you did and have taken advantage of it, and the blue sky area is gone, and you're just getting the dribs and drabs. So it's not going to be as effective for you as for the first person who found the exploit. What you should be looking for is lead bullets, not silver ones. So stay away from micrometrics. So 100 new or a 100% increase in Twitter followers, a 400% increase in free trial signups, 200% increase in website traffic. All of these things, in real terms, as far as monetization goes, are useless. Those are micrometrics. What you need to focus on is real macrometrics, so things that can be somehow tied back to revenue generation. And every one of those metrics should have a counter metric. And this comes from a really great Intercom article that I actually found the other day when I was building this presentation, which coincidentally was also called Growth Hacking is Bullshit, because that's actually what I typed into Google. And this Intercom article came up. Excellent article. Highly recommend it. So the gist of the article is that you should be focusing on having counter metrics to every metric you measure, and that's what helps keep you out of trouble. So as an example, if signing up free trials is your metric, then you need a counter metric, which is what your churn rate is based on that. Or if an increase in new user acquisition is your metric, then how many people upgrade to the next package might be your counter metric. But in the absence of having that counter metric, you're going to optimize very quickly against something that's going to be the wrong thing to optimize against. And we see this all the time in programmatic ad buys. So, and I'll give a plug to the people at Outshine. Colin's here. Most of our clients, we direct them to Outshine to do programmatic ad buying, so AdWords, Facebook, Twitter, things you can optimize. If you don't include some kind of fail-safe in there, all of those platforms start to optimize against the wrong thing. So yes, free trials are a really great thing to get conversions on, but what will happen very, very quickly is that platform will start optimizing itself against idiots who will just sign up for a free trial for anything. And so you're expending a ton of resources in ad dollars and also onboarding people who are very unlikely to turn into paying customers. So you need the counter metric, which is how many of these people churn or how many of these people actually convert into paying customers. And in the absence of being able to measure against that and also programmatically optimize against that, you're going to end up just attracting a lot of people who aren't going to turn into a customer at the end of the day. So does that concept of a counter metric make sense? So those counter metrics are also important because they force a more holistic view of marketing and growth. So questions to ask. If we try this, so I've just read about this growth hack, I'm super excited about it, I'm going to talk to my co-founder and bounce this idea off them. If we try this, and this is what I would ask the question as the co-founder after you've given me this idea that you like, if we try this, how do we know it's not simply feeding a vanity metric? So how do you tie this back to what one of our goals is so that we don't spend the next week obsessing over how many new Twitter followers we got, or how many new Facebook followers we got, or how many new views of this video we got? How do we know that's not feeding a vanity metric? Because almost all growth hacks that I see somehow feed a vanity metric. Very few are tied back to an actual revenue generating activity. If we do this, what is the lost opportunity cost of doing this and not something else? And the reason I love that question is because when you push back on somebody on that, they very rarely can give an answer. So they're like, well, it's not quantifiable. Like, I don't know, it's going to take me 5 hours of time this week to do this whole thing. And intellectually, if they're honest, it's probably more like 10 hours. Okay, that's great. You as a founder or an early stage employee, what could you have done with that 10 hours? If you had phoned potential clients for 10 hours, what would you have gotten out of that? That's probably far more worthwhile than a bunch of web views or Twitter followers or whatever. Picking on Twitter today, but anyways. How much time will it take to unwind this effort if it fails? So if we try this and it doesn't work, how much time is it going to take me to go mop up the damage? I have to go ensure that we've logged out, gotten all our credentials, nothing's active in that platform anymore. A lot of the time it's creating a profile on a new tool. So now do we have to babysit this new profile forever? Or do we have some kind of community? Now we've got 200 users on this profile on this new platform. That's a social media platform that may not take off. Now do we have to babysit this thing for the next 2 years? Or can we kill it off? So how much effort is it going to take to put this to bed if this doesn't work for us? And statistically speaking, it probably won't. And what is our plan for doing this? And again, because a lot of people who dub themselves growth hackers are kind of lazy, if you force the question of, okay, you could totally do this, but you have to give me what the plan is for us to unwind this. If it doesn't work, they won't go and do it because they're too lazy to actually create the plan to unwind the thing that they want to do. And that should be pretty telling. So what's marketing's real job? Marketing's real job is to generate higher quality, qualified leads and help these leads close as sales more often, faster, and for more money. Sales velocity. That's what companies should be focused on. And every effort in your organization should somehow contribute to this. That's what generates true growth and value. And if somebody's got a growth hack or you're looking at a growth hack and you're considering doing it, you should ask yourself, does it fall into this category of items? And if it doesn't, why would you do it? As founders and early stage employees, your most finite resource, contrary to probably what you believe right now if you're eating free pizza, is not money, it's time. And every one of these little efforts takes time and attention, and that's a huge, huge cost to an organization of your size. Growth hacks, I tend to refer to as playing checkers, and most of you guys want to be playing chess. So they're little, I'm going to move this piece to here, and I've taken one checker. Not long-term thinking, not longitudinal. You need to be playing chess. Every effort you put forward should be something where you're thinking about 3-4 moves down the board. And if this is a little tactic that doesn't play into that as a larger scale scenario, again, you have to ask yourself why you would do it. So true marketing, not growth hacking, but actual marketing, it requires planning, especially if you're focused on growth. That means having monthly, quarterly, and annual goals and a rough outline on how you're going to achieve them. And again, if you're hiring an early stage marketer for your company or employing one on a contract basis, this should be something you're talking about with them. they're not going to want to talk about this if their focus is growth hacking and they just want to do little, small, finite tactics and quick little dirty wins. That's not what you need. You need somebody who wants to put scores up on the board on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis. Every marketing goal should support a sales goal, which would call into question, if you're a startup and you don't have any sales goals, that's probably a problem. And for a lot of you, that sales goal might be, we want to get 5 people testing our MVP next quarter. We want 1 paying customer in the next 6 months. This doesn't have to be, exactly down to the dollars and cents, but you should have these goals as a startup. And any of you guys who've done Propel, John and I have probably squeezed you pretty hard in coming up with some of those numbers. Having those sales goals means that's what you tie your marketing goals back to. And if your sales goal is we want to have 5 people using our MVP in 6 months, then marketing has to be doing their level of effort in order to achieve that. And there's a lot of tactics that marketing can do to help with that. But we're a startup. That excuse of, well, we don't know what our sales are going to be this year, or we don't know how many users we're going to have, or yeah, we haven't really nailed down our pricing yet. Those are bullshit excuses made by people who don't want to do the tough thing, and the tough thing is planning. And so yes, plans are going to change. You're a startup. You're going to have to pivot. You're going to have to do different things. But saying that we haven't decided whether our pricing is going to be $15 or $30, and that's your excuse for not being able to predict how much revenue you're going to have at the end of the year, that's just intellectually lazy. Like, that's just not wanting to plan. Because that's not the cool, sexy part of running a startup. So yes, no plan survives contact with the enemy. Whatever revenue plan that you come up with or marketing plan that you come up with is going to have to change on a quarterly, maybe even monthly basis, but that's not an excuse not to do it. I've worked at Fortune 500 companies, and they change their sales plan and their marketing plan every 3 months, and that's fine. But they still do it. You don't get to not do it. It's part of running a business. So first, get your marketing house in order. And for those of you who've gone through Propel, you're going to recognize this. This is what you need to focus on if you're doing marketing and hopefully enabling sales at a startup. So there's 10 things that you need to have in play. Once you get these in play, start looking at the other stuff like growth hacks. That's fine. But you should be able to answer these 10 questions before you're spending your time in how we're going to do all these other things that you're reading about on these websites. So, what is your value proposition? And can you give that to me in 156 characters? And 156 characters is because that is how many characters you have in a Google SERP description. So when somebody Googles something, you've got 156 characters, give or take, depends on kerning, but you have approximately 156 characters in order to describe what your organization does. If you can't give me your value proposition in 156 characters, you failed at marketing on the internet, which for companies in Nova Scotia are probably hoping for American dollars. That's a pretty big fail. That's something you should be focusing on. Who is your customer? Again, this might change. You're going to pivot. You're going to look at different audiences. You're going to find out new things. But you should be able to give me a somewhat coherent one-sentence answer to this question. If you can't answer this question, you should definitely not be doing any growth hacking that involves paying for ads on the internet, because you're running those ads to the wrong people. Who might buy our product? May not always be the same as who is your end user. So a lot of the time, and Core is a great example, the end user of a product is not the person who's going to make the buying decision. And you should be able to very explicitly describe the difference between those two groups of people. What is their buying pattern? So do they buy on a monthly basis? Do they buy on an annual basis? Do they buy with credit cards? Do they tend to require POs? Do they buy at the end of fiscal years when they're dumping money because they're a government or a university? Or are they always really flush at the start of a fiscal year because they're a publicly traded company? Are they dumping money at the end of the quarter, etc.? Those are things you should be thinking about, especially if you're doing higher end sales. Who's your competition? And for those of you who've ever, and at least one person in this room's got burned by telling me this before, if you think you have no competition, you are fundamentally doing something wrong. So if you have no competition explicitly, it means that people don't have money to spend on the thing you're going to do. You may not have direct competition. Maybe you're doing something new, but you still have share of wallet competition, you have share of mind competition, you have a lot of other stuff going on you should be thinking about. How much will your average sale be? Again, that's going to evolve and change and hopefully go up over time, but you should have a rough idea on this. How long will your sales cycle be? 2 months, 6 months, 12 months? You can't properly advertise on the internet and spend money and invest money in building an audience on Facebook or gaining conversions on AdWords if you don't know that it's going to take 1 month for those people to convert from being a lead into a paying customer or 12 months to convert from being a lead to a paying customer. Because if you're wrong by about 6 months, you're probably going to run out of money. How will your potential customers hear about you? Is it going to be on social media? Is it going to be via search engine? Is it going to be word of mouth? Some of this stuff's going to be pretty tough if you don't have any customers yet. Word of mouth is going to be a bit of a stretch if you don't have any customers. And how will they hear from you? Is it going to be email? Is it going to be phone? Are you selling to the type of person and the size of sale that you need to be there in person in order to close the deal? Or are these very small transactional things that you can do with PayPal? These are the 10 things that you should be trying to answer, and they require planning and a lot of forethought, which is hard, so people don't like to do it. But this is the stuff you should be doing instead of thinking about what little growth hack you can put into market. People don't like this though. This is like, I have to sit down with my co-founder for 1 day in a room without any other people, versus growth hacks, which tend to be, oh boy, I just read about this at lunch. I'm going to try it out. This stuff's intellectually difficult, so people tend not to do it. But this is what you need to be doing if you want true growth at your organization. So, how many people here have a marketing person at their company or a dedicated salesperson? Even if it's one co-founder's job, sales and marketing, and one co-founder's job is other co-founder things. So like 3, 4? Okay. Has anybody ever talked to you guys about, well, definitely you, because John and I are pretty consistent with our message, but has anybody talked to you guys about sales and marketing SLAs? So you have to do some kind of sales planning. We want $100,000 of revenue at the end of the next 6 months. That's great. So then there's a backwards path to that, which is it'll take us 4 opportunities in order to close 1 sale. And I've Googled some stuff, and it looks like to get 4 opportunities, I'm probably going to have a conversion rate of 25%. So I need 16 qualified leads to get to that. And maybe 10% of my leads are qualified leads, so I need 160 leads to get there. Okay, well, how am I going to get 160 leads? And you have to go back through that math. And there's some very easy online formulas for how to calculate that. You have to have some kind of idea on what that math is, and then hopefully, as you hire your first sales or your first marketing person, you force them, or as one co-founder to another, you force your co-founder to come to a SLA between sales and marketing. And the sales and marketing SLA is, I as sales, if you give me X number of qualified leads, A, I will follow up with them within XX hours. And a lot of the time, that is you as co-founder A holding co-founder B to that number, because it's very difficult to call people who come in as leads, especially if you're not a sales co-founder by nature. So a lot of the time, we get co-founders who have leads coming in, and they have to build up a lot of intestinal fortitude in order to make that phone call, and that's a problem. That's a real problem, because there's a half-life to leads, and it literally goes down by the minute. And so we have clients who have 7, 8, 9-minute SLAs on their salespeople for new leads coming in. They do that because they know the odds of a deal closing, and we've measured this on really, really big data sets, like think tens, if not hundreds of thousands of leads. The half-life value of that lead decreases incredibly rapidly. So you need some SLA between you, co-founder A, and co-founder B, or you, co-founder and first salesperson, whatever the case may be, on any new lead that comes in that looks like it's going to be qualified, we're going to phone within XX hours. And you're not experienced at sales yet, so it might not be 9 minutes. It might be you need to have a stiff drink, make a plan, discuss with your co-founder what you're going to talk to these people about, call, have them hang up on you. That's fine. Keep trying. So I don't think we can expect you to be at a 9-minute SLA, but you need an SLA. Because in the absence of that, what we know from the co-founders that we work with on a pretty regular basis is you'll put off calling that person for a week because you really don't like to make cold calls. So you need some kind of forcing mechanism to make that happen. And you also need an agreement, once you do have your first salesperson, on if we hand you a qualified lead, you're going to at least come close. And the number will be wrong again. Nothing survives first contact in battle. But some kind of number of, if I hand you a qualified lead, so this is a lead, we've established they have budget, they have authority, they have need for our product, they have timeline to purchase it, we expect you to close 15% of these. And it could be totally wrong. And after 3 months, you go back and you revisit that, and that's fine. But there should be some sort of expectation. There should be some measure of success.